now be recorded.
In which other subject did you happen to hear this word menopause apart from obstetrics and gynecology? In which other subject did you happen to hear this word?
Physiology.
Yeah. So physiology. So from that knowledge, you please tell me what is menopause? Define menopause.
Oh, permanent cessation of menstruation, ma'am.
Yeah, good. So when is it permanent cessation of menstruation? Is that answer sufficient, or you want to add some more terms to it? Yes.
After the age of 45 years, ma'am.
Good. Due to why is the menses stopping?
Cessation of ovarian function, ma'am.
Good, excellent. So cessation of the ovarian activity. Okay, good. So and the age of menopause, as your friend told, it is for Indian females, it is between 45 to 50 years. So the age of menopause, as you all know, is affected by the geographic distribution plus race plus the familial tendency will also be there. How the mother or grandmother or sisters of that patient, whatever age they have reached menopause, the same age even this lady would be reaching the menopause at. Then what are the clinical features of menopause? What are the clinical features? See, is menopause physiological or pathological?
Physiological.
Yes. So, what are the features to say that this woman has reached menopause apart from cessation of menses? What else do you expect?
Ma'am, there is lack of sleep.
Yes, good. What else?
Hot flashes.
Good.
Hot flushes, yes.
Yes. What else?
Irregularity of the period.
disturbances, ma'am.
Sleep disturbances, hot flushes. Anything else?
Irregularity of menses, ma'am.
Okay, that will start perimenopausally only. Okay, so actual menopause, she will say that she is not having menses at all. Okay, so irregularity of menses prior to actual menopause phase. What else she can complain of? Which
Ma'am,
we
psychological
suspect that-
disturbances.
Yes, mood changes, irritability. Okay, so irritability, mood changes, mood swings. So she may not be behaving. Suddenly you see that till yesterday or till morning she was all right. Suddenly she gets irritated for small things also, which was not her behavior previously. Okay, so like that. So mood swings, irritability, all these are symptoms of menopause. Yes, what else? Any urinary symptoms that she may come to you with? Just think about the organs that are affected by menopause, so that she will have symptoms of those affected organs. Okay, but still they're physiological only. We are not branding them as pathological and treating them with some medications. She may have some urinary disturbance in the form of increased frequency of micturition, burning micturition, isn't it? Then some vaginal dryness, difficulties in coitus, dyspareunia she may complain of. And then she may also complain of burning sensation in the vulval area or the vaginal area. That's because of the dryness of the vagina, because of lack of estrogen hormone, lack of natural lubrication of the vagina. Okay. So all these are clinical features which you don't consider to be pathological to be treated. Okay, you will just say that these are all because of the hormone changes, and you will convince her to get adapted or try to adjust herself to these changes so that she will have a smooth menopause. Okay, see, all these changes or the clinical features will have a peak effect up to 5 years like that, or sometime for some people up to 6-7 years, beyond which these symptoms will subside, and then she will have an adaptation to that menopause. Then what investigations do you need to do to diagnose menopause? Do you need to do any investigations? Though I said it as physiological, do you need to do? First of all, do you need to do any investigations?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. When do you think you should be doing investigations? You just think and answer. See, all these things are not very difficult questions to answer. And according to me, even from my subject, that is obstetrics and gynecology also, you might have had one session in your third semester or in your second MBBS, yes, on menopause. Did you have a session?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So with that knowledge, at least I would expect you to answer this. So do you want to do investigations? Yes. Then when? For every woman, are you doing investigations to diagnose menopause? You just think about your own people, your mother or your aunt or somebody who reached menopause. Are they having investigations to have it confirmed that they have reached menopause? Are they having
For premature
investigations to
menopause.
diagnose? Yeah, so there are some particular conditions where you may have to do some investigations to confirm that it is menopause. Like, as your friend told, it is premature menopause. Or when all those physiological clinical features or physiological symptoms are not tolerable by the woman, okay, or they are exaggerated in manifestation. She's having more frequent hot flushes, or she's having a severe urinary tract infection symptoms. Then you should start doing some investigations to know if it is because of menopause or some other problem adding to this menopause and complicating it. Okay. So that time you may have to know whether it is really menopause causing. So what investigations would you like to do to know the menopause or to diagnose menopause?
FSH levels, ma'am.
FSH and LH levels, ma'am.
Excellent. So
FSH
only
and
FSH is
LH
sufficient.
also.
Good. So why LH? LH is not much useful, but just simple serum FSH levels. It is sufficient to diagnose menopause. What else? What other non-invasive investigation? Anything? Which will tell about the condition of the ovaries.
Ovaries, ma'am. Ultrasound.
Yes, good. Ultrasounds to know the size of the ovaries, whether any follicles are there or not. So all these things will help us to diagnose menopause. What happens to FSH level in menopause?
Increases, ma'am.
Rises, ma'am.
Yes. Can you tell the level beyond which you say it as menopausal level of FSH? What's the normal level? Okay, this will be homework for you. You please refer and let me know in the next session what is the menopausal level of serum FSH. Okay. Now, what are the problems that are peculiar to menopause? So all this while I was telling menopause is physiological. There are some physiological changes, symptoms which are only physiological. Now, let me know from you what are the problems of menopause? What are the complications of this physiological condition? What complications?
Osteoporosis, ma'am.
Good. Osteoporosis.
Cardiovascular risks, ma'am.
Like
The estrogen is protective against these heart diseases.
yeah, which heart disease? Cardiovascular risk means she's at risk for
Coronary
which
artery diseases, ma'am.
Atherosclerosis.
So, yeah, so she's prone to develop myocardial infarction. So she stands an equal chance, like a male counterpart of this age, to develop MI, myocardial infarction. Okay. So ischemic heart disease. So all these years when estrogen was there, it was cardioprotective, preventing the risk for developing ischemic heart disease. But now, after the woman reaches menopause, she stands equal risk as a male counterpart of the same age in developing ischemic heart disease. So that's a very potential risk of menopause. Osteoporosis, then ischemic heart disease. What else? Something to do with the mind, where females are more prone because of menopause also. What is it?
Alzheimer's disease, ma'am.
Yes, Alzheimer's disease, dementia. Yes. So Alzheimer's disease also has other components, but menopause may predispose a woman to develop it early also. So Alzheimer's disease, senile dementia, all these things may result from menopause. So they are complications of menopause. Okay, a physiological process is ultimately leading to some pathological complication. Okay, then Define premature menopause.
Menopause occurring before 40 years, ma'am.
Good, excellent. So, any cessation of menses for 1 year. See, your friend, when she was defining menopause, she forgot the clause of 1 year. So, absence of menses for a duration of 1 year in the menopausal age of 45 to 50 years is menopause. But if the same cessation of menses for 1 year occurs before the age of 40 years, then you label it to be a case of premature menopause, which is pathological and requires evaluation. Okay, so it is not physiological. So it is occurring little early means you should just probe as to what could be the cause, because now she stands at very early risk of developing ischemic heart disease, osteoporosis. Okay, so premature menopause is a pathological condition. Okay, then if menopause is not reached beyond 55 years, is it okay? Delayed menopause, the other extreme, is it okay? Should you be happy that a woman is menstruating even beyond 55 years? Yes or no?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No. No. Okay. So majority of you say that even continuation of menses, even beyond the age of menopause, that is beyond 55 years, is not acceptable. Yes, I do agree. And let us see in the next slides as to why did I say delayed menopause is also ominous or bad. So now the topic for today will be postmenopausal bleeding. Now this is a very, very important clinical topic plus practically important topic. You can clinically important because if you see your immediate task of attending the exam, you can get a long case of postmenopausal bleeding in gynecology. So if you see the definition of postmenopausal bleeding, any bleeding from the genital tract after 1 year of menopause is labeled as a case of postmenopausal bleeding. Can you see my picture on the screen? I mean, can you see my face on the camera via this thing?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
So, okay. So I don't think it is, this camera is non-functional or what, I don't know, it's not working. Yeah, now you should be able to see me. I think it was off. So any bleeding from the genital tract after 1 year of attainment of menopause is labeled as a case of a postmenopausal bleeding. So that is a standard definition of PMB or postmenopausal bleeding. But any vaginal bleeding occurring any time after 6 months of amenorrhea in the menopausal age will definitely require investigation. Now just note this. Any bleeding, any abnormal bleeding that is occurring in the menopausal age after just 6 months of amenorrhea. That means, what did I mean by this is, suppose you have a 55-year-old lady who says that since last 6 months, I did not have even a 1 drop of bleeding per vaginum, but suddenly since yesterday, I am bleeding per vagina. Now that lady, though she strictly doesn't fit into the criteria of 1 year of menopause, still you should start investigating. That is the meaning of this second sentence. Okay. But the standard definition is any bleeding occurring after 1 year of menopause is said as postmenopausal bleeding. But any bleeding occurring in the menopausal age after 6 months of amenorrhea warrants or requires investigation or evaluation. Then, as I previously told, even continuous menstruation after the age of menopause, that is 52 to 55 years, also needs an evaluation. Because are you all there, or did I lose connectivity with you?
Yes, ma'am, we are there.
We can hear you.
Okay. So let us, after the definition, now let us see what are the conditions causing postmenopausal bleeding. Now, all said and done, the case of postmenopausal bleeding is usually due to a underlying malignancy. That you should keep in mind. So the first diagnosis that should come to your mind, or suspicion that should be there in your mind when a patient comes with a complaint of postmenopausal bleeding, is any underlying genital tract malignancy. This point you should note. So that is the reason I put among the etiological factors the genital tract malignancies as the first condition causing postmenopausal bleeding. So if you see the genital tract malignancies, it could be carcinoma of the endometrium, carcinoma of the cervix, carcinoma of the ovary, carcinoma of the vulva and vagina, sarcoma of the uterus. Again, among the carcinomas of the ovary, the specific carcinomas are hormone-producing tumors like granulosa cell tumor, Theca cell tumor, Brenner tumor. Okay, so among the ovarian cancers, the hormone-producing tumors are notorious to cause postmenopausal bleeding. Then, benign causes. So after the important cause, or the first cause of postmenopausal bleeding, now I go to less commonly occurring causes or less important causes. That is benign causes. The first one in this is again endometrial hyperplasia. Now, you all know that the endometrium in postmenopausal uterus should undergo atrophy. But due to some reason that endometrium did not atrophy, endometrium is again growing in thickness, then it is getting shed off and causing postmenopausal bleeding. So like that, endometrial hyperplasia can cause postmenopausal bleeding. Then endometrial polyps. Okay, that hyperplastic endometrium not only increased in thickness, but it also became polypoidal. So polyp is nothing but a finger-like projection of the mucosal surface, isn't it? As you all know, polyp is a finger-like projection of a mucosal surface. So the endometrial polyp is also a severe type of hyperplasia only. Then cervical fibroid polyps. So if you see the endometrial hyperplasia, endometrial polyps, they are from the endometrial cavity, whereas the cervical fibroid polyps are from the cervix, cervical fibroids, which are becoming polypoidal and projecting out into the vagina. Then other conditions, other benign conditions causing postmenopausal bleeding are decubitus ulcer in a case of prolapse, then atrophied endometrium, then senile vaginitis, vaginal and vulval ulcers, foreign body in the genital tract, usually a forgotten vaginal pessary. See, in children, iatrogenic insertion by child itself, some foreign bodies into the vagina may occur, but in elderly, it is usually a forgotten pessary. So a forgotten foreign body that was inserted to correct a prolapse by a quack can become infected, ulcerated, and cause squamous cell carcinoma of the vagina. Okay. Then, if the woman is on irregular hormone replacement therapy or something called PEP pills. Now, PEP pills are nothing but combined estrogen progesterone hormones, which a woman may take to look young ever or a feminine ever type of appearance. So that is also, and if she's happening to take these hormones irregularly, not on a regular basis, she's using just on and off, then again that will cause irregular hormone levels in the blood. And whenever the hormone levels fall, the endometrium gets shed. So then what are the other conditions causing postmenopausal bleeding? There are some drugs like tamoxifen and irregular or indiscriminate use of estrogen for any breast malignancy or some other condition. And sometimes bleeding per rectum may be mistaken to be bleeding PV. But actually, when you examine the patient, you find that it is some piles, a prolapsed piles or a rectal prolapse, not a vaginal cause or a uterine cause causing bleeding. Or bleeding per urethra, again due to a urethral caruncle or a bladder carcinoma. So patient may be wrongly telling us a bleeding per vagina. Okay. Then radiation vaginitis. So this is a condition where patient took some radiotherapy for some other condition, and that caused a radiation vaginitis and ulceration of the vaginal mucosa. Then trauma. Trauma could be due to a sexual contact or a foreign body injury. again causing bleeding per vaginum. And then systemic conditions like hypertension. Now, uncontrolled high blood pressures may cause these minute vessels in the vaginal mucosa to rupture spontaneously, and that can lead to bleeding per vaginum. Okay, see, in that elderly age of beyond 45 and 50, the vessels are all atherosclerotic or arteriosclerotic, causing easy injury of the vessels. Okay, so very high uncontrolled blood pressure itself can stimulate rupture of those delicate vessels, and then on and off bleeding from the vagina. So before I proceed further, now just let us see what are the pathologic mechanisms by which these conditions are causing postmenopausal bleeding. So now, just now I listed the conditions causing postmenopausal bleeding. Now, if you see the textbook, there are almost 20-30 conditions given organ-wise as causes for postmenopausal bleeding. Now, here when I presented the conditions or cause of postmenopausal bleeding, can anybody comment on the way I have presented the conditions causing postmenopausal bleeding? What did you observe? Anybody? Did I give like a textbook all the 30-40 conditions, or did I group them in a specific way? Did you observe anything like that?
Grouping, ma'am.
Group to ma'am.
Yeah, grouping. Yeah, group. On what basis did I group them? Just do some guesswork. See, if I am talking continuously, after halfway through, you will fall asleep, or you will say, when will madam stop the session? I want to go for a lunch break.
Ma'am, based on whether they may become malignant conditions or not.
Okay. That is obvious. So malignant conditions, benign conditions, iatrogenic conditions. So some broad headings. Apart from that, even in those conditions of malignancy, what did you notice?
Sequence, ma'am, from endometrium, then to the cervix, then vulva, vagina. Inside out.
Sequence means inside out. Inside out means I should have started from which one first?
Uterus, ma'am.
Uterus. Oh, where is ovary? Inside the pelvis, no?
Oh,
Deep inside.
yes, ma'am.
So I should have started from ovary, but I didn't do that. I started from endometrium. Anybody else?
Ma'am, based on more common to less common causes.
Excellent. Good. Your observation power is good. So, so here I have put my etiological factors or conditions based on the commonly occurring ones first, then the less frequent occurring. The rare things I almost excluded, actually speaking. See, today you go and refer back the Shaw's textbook of gynecology regarding the same etiological factors for postmenopausal bleeding or conditions causing postmenopausal bleeding. You will see the difference in my presentation and textbook presentation. See, why I am stressing on this is, in the exam, what we notice is, whether it is for theory question or whether you're answering in the bedside clinics, when we ask you what are the conditions causing postmenopausal bleeding, students tend to tell the textbook wise conditions. So in the textbook, the first one may be malignancy of the fallopian tube, which is so rare, or it could be carcinoma of the vagina, again, which is very, very less common. Okay, so students tend to tell more like a theory wise. We should not do that, and you are telling almost all the 30-40 conditions the book has given. No, you start answering in the order of occurrence, the most frequent conditions or the most frequent causes. You should start answering from that. Then go to lastly, you will be telling about the less frequent or the rare conditions. Okay, so that is how you should learn to answer, whether it is bedside clinics or your exam viva or theory. What happens once you start telling the rare things first, the examiner becomes restless. He feels that you are just telling a theoretical one, you have mugged up something or memorized something and you're uttering it out. may not wait for you to tell the commonest condition. Okay, so he must rate you with less marks. So to avoid all these fallacies, even theory corrections also. Suppose if you start writing all the 100 causes, examiner may not have patience to check and search for the most important conditions in your entire 100 conditions. Okay, so you will just see few and you think that your answer is not good or up to the expectation and you will score less marks. So to avoid all these, from next time onwards, when you are presenting, whether it is theory or practicals, you start telling about the common conditions first, then go to the other things, and lastly the rare things. Even if you don't tell the rare things, nobody will find fault with you or rate your answer as wrong or bad. Okay, so that you should practice. So if you see here, I have grouped the cancers first, because I said when it is a postmenopausal bleeding, which is a very bad or an ominous thing, first have suspicion and exclude genital tract malignancies or cancers as causes, then only go for others. If you see the way these cancers are causing postmenopausal bleeding, if you see carcinoma endometrium, carcinoma ovary, these both are hormone dependent tumors. So any source of estrogen, whether it is ovarian source or extra ovarian source, that estrogen levels which should not have been there during menopause are actually present in these conditions and stimulating the endometrium to start growing now. The endometrium which should not have grown in the menopausal age should have been silent, should have been non-responsive to hormones, will now start responding to this exogenous source of hormones, and then it starts increasing in thickness, and once it overgrows its blood supply, it starts getting shed, and that will manifest as a menopausal bleeding or a on and off bleeding per vagina. Okay, so among the ovarian conditions, that is the reason I said these hormone producing tumors, the granulosa cell tumor, theca cell tumor, the Brenner tumors are the ones that are producing estrogen hormones, progesterone hormones. Okay, now tell me, which is the cell in the follicle that is producing estrogen hormone? Normally, what is the source of estrogen hormone in the follicle?
Theca cell, ma'am.
Before theca cell?
Granulosa cell.
Yeah, yes, both granulosa cell, theca cell, which are the surrounding cells of the follicle, isn't it? See, if you see the Graafian follicle, you have the central ovum, then you have the Leica folliculi. Around that, you have layers of granulosa cells, then the theca cells, isn't it? Again, theca interna, theca externa. So you have these cells. Now, these naturally producing granulosa cell, theca cells, which are the natural sources of estrogen, should have stopped functioning in menopause, isn't it? But due to some reason, in cases of these cancers, they will become active, and then they start producing their substance, that is estrogens and progesterones. So progesterones, the source is usually the theca cell, isn't it? So once a Graafian follicle becomes a corpus luteum, you have the same cells producing the progesterone hormone also. So that is the reason these granulosa cell tumors, theca cell tumors, and Brenner tumors all are producing estrogen progesterone hormones, which are again stimulating the endometrium to grow and then lead to postmenopausal bleeding. Now, and many times carcinoma of the ovary may coexist with carcinoma of the endometrium, or if you detect carcinoma of the endometrium, then you should immediately probe if there is an associated carcinoma of the ovary. Like this, endometrium and ovary are mutually dependent. And what's the third carcinoma that can coexist with with the endometrium and ovary? Can you tell me which other organ cancer can coexist with endometrium and ovarian cancers?
Breast cancer, ma'am.
Very good, excellent. So breast cancer. So breast cancer also, you should check in these women if they also have an underlying breast cancer. So you should do a breast examination and exclude any breast cancer. So carcinoma cervix, it is growth from the cervix. You all know that carcinomas are common in extreme age groups, especially in elderly age groups. So carcinoma cervix also can occur in these. Actually, carcinoma cervix is more common in which age group? In which age group does carcinoma cervix occur?
From 30 to 40 years.
Yeah, so it is in that younger age group actually. Yes, less than 40 years. Good. That is the reason we ask women to have pap smear from 30 years itself, isn't it? So carcinoma cervix is a cancer of a younger age group, less than 40 years. Whereas other cancers occur more frequently in the elderly age groups. But it is not that carcinoma cervix should not occur, but it can still occur in these postmenopausal women. So that is the reason it is also one of the cause for postmenopausal bleeding. Then other less common conditions are carcinoma vulva, carcinoma vagina, and sarcomas of the uterus. That is from the myometrium. Sarcoma is from the so leiomyosarcomas of the uterus or sarcoma from the myometrium of the uterus are rare conditions or rare malignancies causing postmenopausal bleeding. Then again, these benign causes of endometrial hyperplasia, endometrial polyps, already I told, they are responding to an exogenous source of estrogen causing endometrium to overgrow. So now when I said decubitus ulcer of the prolapse, what is decubitus ulcer in prolapse? Any idea? Okay, so prolapse, I don't think you might have had a session. So decubitus ulcer is nothing but a ulceration of the prolapsed uterus and cervix. Okay, it is similar to the varicose ulcer. See, if you see a varicose ulcer in a varicose vein, if you see the pathology or how it develops, it is venous congestion, the anoxic atmosphere causing ulceration in varicose ulcer. Same way, even in decubitus ulcer of prolapse, the descent of the uterus and cervix below its normal anatomical level will interfere with its blood supply. So there will be decreased venous return, decreased arterial blood flow, causing congestion of the cervix and ischemia, necrosis, and ulceration of the most dependent part of the cervix. So that is how the decubitus ulcer will develop. Now prolapse, uterovaginal prolapse of the uterus and cervix is again a condition occurring in the menopausal age group. So naturally, if a woman is having a prolapse along with a decubitus ulcer, she may come to you with a complaint of postmenopausal bleeding. Okay, then I said atrophic endometrium. So the normal atrophied endometrium of menopausal age also may on and off cause some bleeding because the atrophied endometrium loses its strength. See, just like in old people, in menopausal women, the skin of the body becomes wrinkled. That's also a normal change, isn't it? So it becomes less, it is less strong. So simple injuries, small injuries also will cause abrasions and ulcerations of the skin. So same way in the endometrium also, small injuries or small vascular changes locally can cause on and off ruptures of the vessels and lead to bleeding. So atrophic endometrium, atrophic vaginitis or senile vaginitis are all due to small mucosal abrasions or ulcerations due to vascular erosions causing bleeding. Okay, now coming to this foreign body in the genital tract, I have a picture to show you. So in a case of prolapse, I said again prolapse is a condition occurring in menopausal age where cervix and uterus come out of the vagina and they're lying out. They have lost strength to their support, so they have descended out of the cervix and vagina. So sometimes in that age group, they may not be able to come to the hospital. Nobody is able to take care of them. They are not being brought to the hospital. Or with the wrong notion that it can be surgically corrected. They don't know that it can be surgically corrected. So they just went to a quack. So the quack has put some foreign body to reduce that mass, like a ring. See, like a ring pessary. Okay. So they have reduced that descended cervix and uterus inside the vagina. And then to prevent it from coming out again, they have put a ring or a ball-like structure or a rubber ball, something into the vagina. Once they have put that, the cervix and vagina will go into its normal place and no more prolapse. So patient will also feel that her prolapse got relieved. And that foreign body will remain inside the vagina like that, and she will forget about that. What happens over years, this foreign body, either in the form of a ball or a ring that was inserted in the vagina, will cause abrasions on the contact area of the vaginal mucosa. It is in contact with the vaginal mucosa, isn't it? So wherever it is in contact with the vaginal mucosa, it causes abrasions and ulcerations. And repeated abrasions, repeated ulceration, you all know, can lead to carcinoma. So like that, these women may start having on and off bleeding because of the vaginal mucosal ulcerations, or slowly, silently, she may be developing a vaginal carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, and that may be manifested as postmenopausal bleeding. She'll forget that she had a prolapse, she had a mass inserted in, and that is a cause for the bleeding. So all that history she may not tell you unless you start probing it. Okay. So like that, a forgotten pessary. See, a pessary is a foreign body kept in the vagina. Okay. So a pessary, a forgotten pessary, can this way lead to postmenopausal bleeding. Now, not only rings and balls, the routine regular playing balls, rubber balls also will be inserted by quacks. You also see some seeds like wood apple. Wood apple. You know wood apple? What is wood apple? Anybody can tell what is wood apple? Telugu word for wood apple is? Anybody? Are you all there, or you lost connectivity with me? Wood
We are
apple is
there,
nothing.
ma'am.
Okay. Tell me, what is wood apple? Any idea? Wood apple. So you're all, nobody is really ethnic or having a rural background or a traditional background. You're all born in modern culture, I think. See, wood apple is nothing but, anybody would like to try what it is?
Yelakapandu.
Velagapandu, good. So, Velagapandu. So it is that fruit which usually you get to see it in the market during August, September seasons, around Vinayak Chavithi or Ganesh Chaturthi. Okay, wood apple is nothing but that fruit. Usually elephants eat that fruit. So that fruit, if it is in a dried form, it works like a nice solid thing that can be used by quacks. It is used by quacks to reduce the prolapse and insert it into the vagina. So many times we have seen women coming with a reduced prolapse with a foreign body in the vagina and complaints of postmenopausal bleeding. When we put a speculum and see, to our surprise, we see these wood apples left off inside. Then we start asking the patient, who put it, when did you have it inserted? Then she'll start telling the story, how it happened and why it was put and all that. So, but it is very difficult to remove. So it's because it will swell with the secretions. So it will absorb the fluid inside the fluid from the tissues, and it will become swollen. So naturally, what happens? The size of the wood apple that was inserted originally will now become double the size. So we find it very difficult to remove it vaginally. Sometimes we may have to give an episiotomy and deliver it like a head delivery also. So many times we had that type of situations. So foreign body inserted for a prolapse in the form of a ring pessary or a rubber ball or a wood apple are common cause of postmenopausal bleeding. So like that, we have to think of these foreign bodies in our mind. Then, now once a patient comes to you with a complaint of postmenopausal bleeding, you feel that it is an ominous thing, a bad sign, you have a suspicion of a malignancy, then you'll subject her for investigations. You'll first do a physical examination, a gynecological examination of pars speculum PV. You exclude all these conditions like a forgotten pessary or any other conditions. Then you start investigating her. Okay. So what investigations we will do? So when you're managing a patient, first you will evaluate or investigate, then you will treat. So during evaluation, you will take a history, you will do the examination, and then go for this invest. So what investigations, specific investigations that you will recommend for these women are a pap smear to diagnose any cervical cancer. Even if the cervix is looking normal, you should take a pap smear. Then if there is a growth, you will take a biopsy of it, cervical punch biopsy. And then you do some non-invasive investigations also, like ultrasound to know for any enlarged uterus, any abnormalities in the ovary, and you'll also see for any endometrial hyperplasia. So you will measure the endometrial thickness by ultrasound. Normally in a menopausal woman, the endometrial thickness should be 4 millimeters and less. If it is above that, means endometrium is again growing under the influence of estrogens coming from somewhere. Okay. So these are the specific investigations that you will do in this woman with the postmenopausal bleeding. Let me check if I have time to continue. You have another session after this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So yeah. So I will just talk for 3-4 minutes and then stop. So let us have a discussion in detail about these investigations. So I'll just discuss about the pap smear. Okay. So pap smear or cervical cytology is the investigation that is done routinely in all these women with postmenopausal bleeding. Okay. So now pap smear exam point of view also it is very, very important. And also as a clinician tomorrow, you should know how to do pap smear because it is a cancer screening method, which is adopted universal. So universal cancer screening method. So pap smear is a universal cancer screening method to exclude or diagnose cervical cancer at an early stage. Okay. So if you see the pap smear kit or equipment that you require to do a pap smear, you need to have a pap smear kit containing Ayer's spatula, a wooden Ayer's spatula or a metal Ayer's spatula. First. Second, you require a cyto brush like this or a broom like this. That is second thing. Third thing that you would require is a cotton tipped swab. See, this is a cotton tip. Can you see these pictures on your screen? Are they clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the pap smear test kit will contain one spatula, whether it is wooden or metal, one brush, it could be a cyto brush or a broom, and the third one that is a cotton tipped swab. Like this, these three things along with the 2 glass slides, 1 or 2 glass slides will come like a sterile pack. Next time I'll show you a picture of a sterile pack of pap smear kit. Then you need to have a bottle like this, an empty sterile bottle with a fixative, a liquid fixative inside that bottle. So this is how you need to procure the pap smear equipment before you proceed for the pap smear. So now this topic of pap smear will again be dealt with when cancer cervix topic is covered. So you can have a repeat discussion of this in that topic. So you can have an introduction here and then have a recap again when you have a class on cancer cervix. So how do you do this procedure? See, usually it is done as an OP procedure without any anesthesia, and the patient is positioned in dorsal position. Then first you take an oral informed consent of the patient regarding this procedure. Then once a patient gives you consent to proceed with this, you will ask her to empty the bladder and lie down on the bed in the dorsal position, on the examination couch in dorsal position. Then you wear sterile gloves. Okay. Then you insert a cuscu speculum into the vagina, and then with this wooden spatula or this metal spatula, you will take the cells. How do you take the cells? See, you will insert this spatula through this into the vagina, reach the cervix, that to ectocervix. Then, now if you see this spatula, it is having an end which is bifid like this, like a fork. It is not a straight or a rounded end. It is bifid like this. So this bifid end is used for taking the cells from the cervix. So this picture is a zoomed picture of the cervix, ectocervix with the bifid spatula end. The long end of this bifid spatula is inserted in the external os, and then you will rotate it in a 360 degrees fashion. Suppose if you can, and you rotate this in a 360 degree fashion over the ectocervix. Okay, so quickly you will twist it, or you will sweep it like a circle over the ectocervix, so that the cells from this ectocervix, especially from the squamo-columnar junction, will get collected on this spatula. And then these cells are smeared on a slide. The cells that you have collected on this spatula are smeared on a slide, and then this slide is dipped into the liquid fixative present in this bottle. Or you can also directly dip the spatula into the liquid present in this bottle. Okay. Then after you take the cells with this spatula, next you again insert the cyto brush or the broom. Now this time you are putting this brush into the endocervical canal and then gently rotating it. There are fine hairs on the cyto brush which will just take the cells from the endocervical canal, and again these cells are smeared on a slide, and this slide you are dipping into the bottle. Or directly you can dip the cyto brush into the bottle. So like this you will collect the cells either on the slide or into the liquid present in the bottle. And these are sent to the pathologist where they do a Papa-Nicolau stain and then read the slide. That is how the pap smear is done and sent to the pathologist for evaluation. In my next class, if it is possible, I will show you the video how a pap smear is taken. Okay. Or in a next session on cervical cancer also, we can have a repeat presentation. Okay. As of now, I think you have a rough idea as to how pap smear is done and how a pap smear equipment is procured and what all things are required. So with this, I'll stop here and continue in my next session.